My husband went on a work trip for 5 years. When he came back and found out truth, he nearly lost it. Peter wasn't supposed to find out. He was never supposed to know it. But he did, and now I don't know where I stand anymore. My husband, Peter, whom I've been married to for 11 years now, went on a work trip for 5 years. When he came back and found out the truth, he nearly lost it. My name is Beatrice, and I'm 35 years old. I've been married for 12 years, like I wrote earlier, but right now, I don't know where I stand in my marriage. My marriage is falling apart, and it's all my fault, to be honest. I did something rather awful, and I know that Peter might never forgive me, even though I crave his forgiveness to ease my guilt and shame too. Peter and I were married for 6 years before he suddenly had to leave for work, so we naturally had 6 years around each other to build ourselves, love ourselves, and also build trust and understanding. Peter works as an engineer for one of the largest companies in the state, and he was always away, but as long as he had been this time. He could go away for a month or two, depending on how long the contract is supposed to be for, and we had always been fine with it. Peter was easily the best engineer his company had, and therefore he was always sent most times on the important jobs. I understood the demands of his job, and he understood mine. My job wasn't exactly as demanding as his, but I work as a secretary in a firm, and I definitely didn't spend most of my hours groveling around in the house waiting for my husband to show up. When he did show up, we made up for all the lost weeks or months with enough bonding. We had that as time, and it had always been good, really. We agreed on not having a kid at first because of our demanding jobs, although Peter's mother didn't think the same as us. She wanted me to quit my job so I could stay at home and birth our kids and take care of them, and she was always nagging me about it. It got worse when Peter had to be gone for 5 years. She kept blaming me for not having a child by then, and instead having to wait until he got back. It was always draining having to deal with her, but Peter understood me, and he never took her words to heart like I did. He would only ever joke about it and craftily change the conversation. Somehow between Peter's job and mine, the years just passed and children just never were able to be substituted into the mix. We never really had any real conversations with kids involved. When he was around and wasn't busy with work, we were busy making up for the lost times in bed and discussing how work was and updating each other. Kids just somehow didn't seem like the right conversation to have, and when we try to bring it up, Peter is either called again to work or something else happens. And like that, 6 years just passed between us. Then Peter had to suddenly go on a work trip, which wasn't unusual, but this was different this time. He didn't know how long it was going to be for. Apparently the work would take months and perhaps years to finish because of how long the project was. Peter offered that I come with him, but I refused. Even though it was the first time he offered to come with him on a work trip, I couldn't go. I didn't know how long the job was going to be for. Even Peter didn't know, and I felt my life was right here, my friends, my family, and my work. If I did go with him, I wouldn't be able to save my job, even if I took a leave of absence, because automatically a person would have to fill in for my space. And it was also impromptu, not enough time to plan anything, so I declined the offer. Peter was understanding, and he accepted my decision. He promised to be back home as soon as he could, and also promised to call and text me whenever he could. The first year went by, and although Peter was calling and texting me every day, it wasn't the same. He hadn't been gone for that long before. He told me that the job took longer than they expected because they needed some sort of approval from the government to build what they had to, and they were being refused. The second year passed, and they finally got the approval they needed to get the project started, but apparently they didn't have enough equipment or something. Somehow, those 5 years passed with different stories coming up. They either hit a bridge or something else happened that would put the project on hold each time. Peter couldn't leave. He was brought there by his company, and the travel expense to come home was too much and would put a dent on our savings. And even though I told him to use the money, Peter was refusing to. He didn't want us not to have anything to fall back on, particularly when kids came into the picture. So I was stuck at home with my husband far away, and my mother-in-law close enough to drive me crazy with guilt of not giving her a grandchild yet. Everything was pretty normal besides that, and it was like that for the whole of the 5 years that Peter was gone. Well, except one thing. There was one thing totally different, and it happened in the 5th year. I was getting excited. Peter told me that the project was definitely ending that year, and then he could come home, and he was taking a year's leave from work so he could spend time with me, and we could finally discuss having kids. I was looking forward to it. I in fact started buying new things into the house, including making some little adjustments for the arrival of a newborn. Everything was pretty great until it just wasn't. My high school friend reached out to me. Amelia and I were great friends in high school, and we were always together back then. But then something happened in the final year of school, and we stopped being friends and talking to each other completely. She had a boyfriend back then, and I knew him, of course, but I also had a big crush on the guy, so when the guy focused his attention on me on the side, I grabbed it. I slept with him, and Amelia found out. She broke our friendship, and the relationship too. But years later after high school, I found out from a mutual friend of mine that because I didn't stay back there after high school, my dad was transferred for work to another different state, and so I lost all contact with everyone. But then I got in contact with that mutual friend through social media, and she had told me that Amelia got knocked up by the same guy we fought over. She got pregnant and couldn't go to college like the others did because she had to fend for her child because apparently the father was irresponsible. I felt pity for her, but I couldn't reach out because I was scared of her rejecting my offer of peace. But then years later, I'm receiving a call, and it turns out to be Amelia. She needed my help, apparently. Her son needed a place to crash for the time being. He is a student in the university close to my place, and she didn't have enough money to pay for his accommodation, particularly after paying his tuition fee. I offered to pay for it, but she refused, saying she didn't want to owe me monetarily. She begged me that it was just for a while until she figured out what to do, and I agreed. I didn't tell Peter about it, though, for some odd reasons. I already agreed to it because I didn't want to turn her down particularly, because it was my fault we stopped speaking in the first place. I knew how much Peter hated people in his space, and I knew he wouldn't appreciate me bringing a stranger into our home regardless of how many years of history was between his mother and I. So I kept it to myself, and that was how Ryan came to live with me. Ryan was obviously young. He was the younger version of his father, who was my crush during high school, and I remember recognizing him instantly when he came from the airport where I went to pick him. The relationship between us was awkward at first. I didn't exactly know how to treat a boy that grew up and is still your frenemy's child. But the tension between us eased gradually, and within a month, we became pals. We grew into this comfortable friendship between us, and we would always gist and talk about our day to each other. I cooked dinner, and he always woke up early to cook me breakfast. It was nice having someone do that for me after such a long time, and I liked it. I think I may have liked it a little too much and was starting to notice stupid things, like how ripped his body was despite how young he is, and how he grinned whenever he was being mischievous, the way his eyes would light up whenever I came back from work, and the way his hand would touch mine and hold on for seconds longer than was necessary when he passed me the ingredients I needed to cook. I didn't know what to make of the feeling I was getting, and I tried so hard to stop it. At one point, I started coming home later than usual so we didn't have to make dinner together or eat together. I left home earlier than usual so I didn't have to eat the breakfast he made, and I hung out with my friends in the evenings so I could just get home and sleep instead. But Ryan noticed all that, and after a week of doing that same thing over and over again, he ambushed me one evening when I came back from my friend's place very late again. I didn't expect that he was going to be waiting, or that he was going to be wearing those boxers that hung very low on his waist and made me curious to see what was inside. As he asked me questions and I couldn't provide an answer, he noticed where my eyes were and he suddenly pulled my hand and put them there as if telling me I could touch it if I wanted to. Maybe it was the strain of staying celibate for almost 5 years without a choice. Or maybe it was just me being selfish and too horny to care about what I was doing, because immediately he placed my hand inside his boxers. I didn't pull my hand back or yell at him never to try again. I just literally grabbed it and started stroking it. We had sex on the floor right in my husband's sitting room. I couldn't wait until we made it to bed before I was peeling off every item of clothing on me and letting him kiss every inch of my body the way I craved being kissed for years. Ryan was young, but he definitely knew his way around a woman's body, because halfway through it, he had to cover my mouth to stop me from waking up the whole neighborhood. We didn't stop there. After the sex on the floor, I went with him to the guest room he was staying in and allowed him to repeat the whole process again, this time on a different surface. I slept off immediately and woke up to Ryan bringing me breakfast in bed. Remembering everything that happened the night before, I was so horrified, and I just left him standing there and dashed to my room. I took a shower and wore my clothes and quickly left for work, ignoring Ryan, who tried to talk to me before I left. At work, I could barely concentrate. All I could feel was guilt, and another feeling that felt foreign to me. I had aches all over my body from the hard way we kept going the previous night, and instead of them being painful, they felt pleasurable. But then I got a call that day at work. It was Amelia. She was asking if her son was being a good boy and wasn't giving me any issues. It was clear from the way she spoke that she really loves her son and would give anything for him. I felt even more guilt after ending the call with her. Trying to stay cheerful while telling Amelia that her son was doing great was just draining. And as if that day was a day meant to make me feel super guilty, I got another call, but this time from my husband. I felt so bad hearing him sound so sad, telling me he misses me. I didn't know how to undo what I had done, and yet my body wanted a redo of what I had done. I went home with every intention to tell Ryan that whatever happened between us couldn't happen ever again. I knew that was the right decision to make, but on getting home and seeing him lying on the couch scrolling through the TV channels, with the remote in his hand, with those boxers of his doing the exact same thing it had done the previous night, everything I had practiced at work just flew off, and I felt myself before I could even think it through reaching for him and kissing him. Ryan had no problem with what I was doing, and he even flipped me over on the couch and helped me with my clothes. That became our regular thing to do. Every day I came back from work, I'd have sex with Ryan and sleep in his bed, and then go back to mine to shower and dress up for work. On days I didn't have to work, especially on weekends, Ryan and I spent it indoors discovering new places on each other's body to turn the other person on. It became a sort of routine. We would cook together when we were hungry, and food eventually ended up being a sex tool. We had sex everywhere in the house. Well, except the bedroom I shared with Peter, which I hardly slept in since I started sleeping with Ryan. It made me feel guilty. I also didn't want to disrespect our wedding vows by sleeping with Ryan on the same bed I shared with Peter. Although Ryan had sex with me in the bathroom inside my bedroom before, we never got close to the bed. That day, I left his bed and went to take my shower, as usual, in my room, and Ryan, being extremely turned on that morning, had come to seek me in the shower, and I ended up being late that morning for work. The first trouble almost came when my mother-in-law decided to turn up at my house randomly one afternoon on a weekend. Luckily, I was the one who opened the door, even though I was barely dressed. Ryan was still sleeping when she came around, and I was so nervous and kept praying that she didn't see him. But luck ran out on me when Ryan stepped out of the room, thankfully wearing his jeans, and when my mother-in-law saw him, the next thing that came out of my mouth were lies. I told her that he's my cousin's son, who needed a place to crash, but he was leaving that morning. Although Ryan played along, I felt guilty because it could have been Peter who walked in, and he knew all of my family, and was even closer to them than I was. He would know instantly that I was lying because I didn't have any cousin grown enough to have a grown man as their child. But it worked out well because my mother-in-law believed me, and she only came to nag me for not coming to visit her as often as I did before, and I was able to make her leave after promising to come spend time with her the next weekend. I also convinced myself while I was kissing Ryan to apologize for lying that Peter wasn't home and couldn't come home yet. He would definitely inform me when he had to, and by that time, I would have sorted out my addiction to sex with Ryan. But things don't always go as you planned them, do they? Because everything ended up being a mess, and a big one at that. One I cannot fix with a simple apology. Ryan had been staying with me for about 8 months then, and we've been sleeping together for 7 out of those 8. He never brought home friends, and the one time he did and introduced me as his aunt, I was so pissed. It took a little more than 2 rough makeup sex to make up for it. And I made him promise to never bring his friends home, particularly girls. I know I didn't love him that way, but I couldn't help but feel jealous that some other girls were getting the treatment I was getting from Ryan, and they could be seen in public with me, unlike me, that could only get kissed and touched that way when we were both indoors with the doors locked and secured. Ryan was starting to drift away, especially after meeting one new girl, and I was desperate to hold on to our relationship. He was always too tired to have sex with me or had some other things to do. I knew he was lying, because I snooped around on his phone one night and I had seen his chats with the girl. When he refused to have sex with me for a whole week, I decided to text the girl and tell her that he was sleeping with another girl and that she shouldn't think he's being sincere, and as I hoped the girl stopped talking to him completely and Ryan was back in my arms again like he never left. I knew I should feel guilty and disgusted with myself for the things I was doing. I did, but it was more like I couldn't stop doing them, and that was exactly what had totally ruined my life. It was New Year's Eve, and I planned to spend the day with Peter's family and then that night with Ryan. I had even gone to the store to get a teacher's outfit. Ever since I found out that Ryan was into kinky stuff, I started buying them. At first, it was a maid's dress, then I was a nurse and then a doctor, and the last time, I was dressed as a monkey lady, and now I wanted to be dressed as a teacher. I was even so excited and looking forward to it. But I had to help my mother-in-law with cooking so she could serve her guests when they arrived. I planned to make a getaway when she wasn't looking and then tell her the next day that I came down with a headache and had to go home to rest, and I didn't want to bother her with such news on a happy night like that. A week before that day, Peter had stopped calling, and even though I was worried, I knew he was safe or was probably busy with work, so I didn't put too much emphasis on hearing from him. When I got home, I met Ryan dressed as a cowboy, but with only the hat and the boots as the matching semblance to a cowboy's outfit. He wasn't wearing a shirt or pants, he only had tight panties on his waist, and I was pleasantly surprised and went along with the whole thing. My own outfit for the night was completely forgotten, and I let Ryan play some songs and dance to it. He danced like a stripper with a client, and he kept helping me out of my clothes one by one, and I just watched him do it until I was only left in my underwear while Ryan kissed me senselessly. Perhaps because I was so into the whole thing, I hadn't noticed when the key turned with someone who definitely had the keys to the house opening the door and coming inside. I didn't know that. That person was staring at Ryan and I in shock, watching as we kissed, and Ryan removed the remaining piece of clothing on my body. It was only when the key dropped with a long bang on the floor that we realized that there was someone else in the house and shockingly turned out to be my husband. Rushing to cover myself was in vain because he had already seen what he saw. Ryan stood there awkwardly like a scared child caught with his hand in a cookie jar. I managed to put on my dress back, and I told Peter that I could explain. He just stood there watching me, and then he walked into our bedroom and dropped his bag on the floor before sitting on the bed. I went with him and started begging him to forgive me. Peter asked me how long. I knew what he was asking, and I knew I couldn't keep up with the lies again, so I told him the truth. I told him about Amelia and her reaching out to me. I told him how Ryan started staying with me, and I told him how we started sleeping together and how long it had been. I didn't know why I was giving him all the details, but staring at Peter with his face scrunched up like that, I couldn't stop trying to explain, and the more explanation I gave, the deeper I dug my grave. Peter stood up all of a sudden after hearing my explanation. He was so angry and had gone to look for Ryan in the guest room to probably beat him up, but Ryan wasn't in his room. In fact, half his load was gone. I knew this without even looking at the wardrobe because the expensive wristwatch was gone. The one I got him 2 weeks ago for his birthday, which he always kept in the drawer because he was afraid to break it because of how expensive it was. He probably ran away when I went with Peter into our bedroom to beg him. Peter was so angry, and he kept throwing Ryan's remaining things and breaking stuff in that room. He went to the living room too with a club and started hitting the couch to break it. I was so afraid, scared that the club would turn on me any instant, and I kept begging Peter to forgive me. When Peter was done hitting the couch, he threw the club aside and then went to our room and started throwing my clothes out of the wardrobe we shared. I kept crying and begging him to listen to me, but he just pushed me aggressively out of the way and continued taking them out. Peter went outside with them and set them all ablaze. He kept throwing more things into the fire, too. Our wedding pictures, the picture we took on our 5th-year anniversary, too. The gift I got him for his birthday 5 years ago before he left, and the last thing he threw into that fire was his wedding ring. When Peter was satisfied that everything was burnt beyond rescue, he went into the house and bolted the door from inside and refused to let me in. I kept begging, but Peter wouldn't let me in no matter how long or how much I begged. I ended up staying out on the couch with barely enough clothing to give me warmth through the night. The next morning I continued knocking and ringing the bell, but Peter still wouldn't respond. I had to go to a friend's place that morning and lied to her that I went out to get something and got locked out throughout the night. She allowed me to stay and have a warm shower and lent me her clothes to wear. They were smaller than me, but I didn't care. After staying at her place for 2 days while texting and begging Peter to forgive me with no progress at all, I had to leave her place to my parents' place so she wouldn't start suspecting it was something more than a locked door. I couldn't even go to work. I had no clothes or even the emotional strength to do so. It's been a week now and I haven't heard anything from Peter. Not that I haven't tried, but Peter refuses to reply to my texts or answer my numerous calls. My parents are beginning to question my lies of missing them and taking the whole week off work so I could come spend time with them, and I don't blame them. Hearing me cry every night in my old room and having to borrow my mom's clothes every day would definitely get anyone suspicious. Guys, I regret everything. I really cannot lose Peter. I love him so much, and I know I did a very horrible thing, but I'm willing to change. I have changed already, and having to spend this last week here in my parents' house has been torture to me mentally. I really want to fix things, and I desperately want Peter to forgive me. I cannot lose my marriage. I cannot lose him. Please, guys, you have to help me. What should I do? Update. Hello, Reddits. I thought I was prepared for the worst. No, I thought I had seen the worst, and that there was nothing going to happen that was going to be as shitty as Peter having found out my secret in that awful way, but I was wrong. I was so wrong because something even more shitty happened, and now there's really no way to fix things. One day after my first post here, I got a text from Peter. It was brief, short, nothing to explain his intention, but I was so excited. He sent in the text that he wanted me to come home the next day. He didn't put a reason why, and he didn't add those love emojis he ended all his sentences with whenever we texted. It was just straight to the point and didn't give me a single clue why he wanted me home, but I was excited regardless. I thought perhaps he had a rethink and was willing to try and work out our marriage again. I thought that maybe he understood the reasons I did what I did and was willing to try to trust me again. I borrowed money from my mom to get a dress and some extra money to travel back. All my money is in the savings account that I shared with Peter, so I couldn't exactly get money if there's no approval from the other party. I went home, happy to be in there again and feeling guilty for the things I did, but to my greatest surprise, when I walked in, everyone was there. When I wrote everyone, I meant everyone. My mom, my dad, my siblings, Peter's family, and shockingly Amelia too were there. Everyone apparently had no clues while Peter had summoned them too, and they told me that Peter asked them to keep their invitation a secret from me. I started getting really scared, particularly after seeing Amelia. I didn't know what Peter was planning, but I had an idea that the morning was definitely not going to end as I expected. I tried to make my escape, but Peter walked in at that moment from wherever he was before and locked the door behind him as if suspecting my intention. I was trapped, and I felt trapped. Peter started addressing the family without removing his eyes from me. He thanked everyone for showing up, and he told them he had a reason for telling them to come. He explained everything exactly the way I had done when I was telling him about the whole situation. I heard Peter's mom gasp, particularly when she heard that the boy was my friend's son and not the family I claimed he was when she came visiting. But I wasn't really bothered by her. I was shaking so much by the time Peter ended his little narration, and my legs could suddenly not hold my weight, so I collapsed to the ground, but no one paid any attention to me. They were all looking at Peter in shock, and then my mom had reached for me and started to grab my clothes while screaming at me. It was my older brother who disentangled her hands from my clothes, and he too looked at me in disgust before leading my mom out of the house after getting the keys from Peter. My father only tapped Peter's shoulders and mumbled some words to him before leaving too. He ignored me completely on the floor and said nothing to me. Peter's mom had plenty to say to me, and apparently so did Amelia. It was Peter's brother who snatched me out of her scratching nails in my hair and on my dress. My dress was torn halfway, and I barely noticed until Peter threw me a cover. He stared at me with a blank expression before handing over the divorce papers in his hands that I hadn't even noticed before. He told me that if I had any shame left that I would sign them right there and handed me a pen too. Well, he threw them on me where I sat on the floor crying. Peter's mom kept talking and threatening me to sign the papers, and with shaky hands, knowing that everything was already ruined, I did that. I signed the papers, and before I could change my mind, Peter's mom snatched them off the floor and handed them to Peter before ordering me to leave her son's home. She kept muttering about how grateful she was that she had no grandchild from me because she wondered what a child from someone like me would turn out to be. Amelia waited for me outside to continue the fight. She kept calling me all sorts of names and regretting ever sending her son to me. She called me a whore and a thief trying to steal everything of hers. I said nothing as she pulled and pushed me. I couldn't defend myself, and in the end we ended up in the police station, each of us having to give our statements for disturbing the neighbor's peace. I couldn't write anything, and Amelia kept screaming in the police station, and by the end of that day, even the police, especially the women, were eyeing me in disgust after hearing everything I did from Amelia's loud voice. With nowhere to go, no access whatsoever to money, I borrowed money from a friend who apparently hadn't gotten the news of my ruined life and managed to rent a small place to stay. She called back in 2 days requesting for her money, though, and with the way she sounded, she had probably heard the whole story already and didn't want me having her help anymore. My life is totally ruined. I've not only become stigmatized amongst my own family, but everybody else too. No one wants anything to do with me anymore, and it's all totally my fault. I cannot believe I destroyed a relationship of over 11 years over something as fleeting as an affair with a boy that I probably could have given birth to if I had a kid around the time his mother did. I feel so ashamed of myself for doing what I did. Being pointed at and gossiped about is now an everyday thing in my life, and it hurts so badly each time I have to see people staring at me stylishly, or most times in unconcealed disgust. I have been fired from my workplace after refusing to show up for over 3 weeks without a particular reason or excuse being made. My life is now so messed up that even if you guys had given some sort of advice to be able to deal with it, I still wouldn't be able to. Not that you guys were exactly forthcoming with ideas or advice to make my marriage work again, only to end up with insults and backlashing comments that has not only pushed me further into depression, but also into a place of no means of coming back out. I know that I deserve to be hated. I know because I hate myself too, and there's probably no one out there that will hate me as much as I hate myself right now. I know I deserve all the insults that I've gotten so far, but it doesn't make it easier to deal with. Knowing that I deserve everything that's coming to me, but it still doesn't make everything less painful. It hurts so badly, knowing that I could have avoided it, knowing that I could have stopped this whole thing from happening. I should have gone with him. I should have gone with Peter when he left. Maybe by now we will have a 4-year-old kid running around the house when we come back. Maybe then, Amelia wouldn't have been able to seek my help to accommodate her son. Then all of these will not be happening. I will still be married and be in my husband's arms. I keep thinking back to that day when Peter had walked in on Ryan, and I clearly about to have sex. I remember the look on his face as he heard everything I had to say. I remember how he stared at me, and without removing his eyes from mine, removed his wedding ring and threw it into the fire. I know it wouldn't burn, but it just signified the end of our marriage, but I was still so desperate to hold on to something, anything at all to get me Peter's affection back, and instead of that, I've gotten the whole world to hate me. I've acquired debts and names that should never be used to qualify an animal talk less of a person. I regret everything so badly. I regret housing Ryan, and I regret sleeping with him. I regret lying to Peter, and I regret him seeing me cheating right in a home that he built us. I don't think there's any way to get past this. I've gone and overdone it. I've ruined the only good thing in my life, and I know there's no recovering from that. Having this constant nagging fear at the forefront of my thoughts that I will always remain like this, or further dip down, makes me feel even more terrible. I wish there was a way to undo this. But with the way everything has ended, I know that there's none. There's no coming back from this hazard that's currently my life. This is my last post here, not that you guys care, but I just hope you guys don't end up becoming like me in the end, especially after reading through my sad and miserable life that has this end. Thanks and goodbye. Thanks.